Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavari Paschatya Satarine. We're continuing our discussion about women, and specifically women in Krishna consciousness, and what Prabhupada has said, what Shastra has said, and how to understand that. And we've been reading from Vishaka Devi Dasi's paper called What's a Woman to Do, which is an analysis of the many things, or many of the things that Prabhupada has said about women. And this is not only important for women, it's also important for men to understand, because a lot of the problems that we've had or are still having are not necessarily because the way women are treating women, but because of the way men are seeing or have seen women, and why they see them in a particular way, which may be true or not true. So, in Shastra, in Prabhupada's commentary, and also in the Acharya's commentaries, often we find statements which appear to be contradictory. One Acharya will say one thing, and one Acharya will say something else, which appears to be different, or even at odds. And Prabhupada explained that sometimes this happens due to their realization. It may also be due to their rasa. But what's interesting is that sometimes we find Prabhupada himself saying things which appear to be contradictory or appear to be opposite. So once I did a search on Srila Prabhupada's definition of less intelligent, and I found that in Shastra and in Prabhupada's own words, the word less intelligent generally comes up in relation to people who are not Krishna conscious, people who don't surrender to Krishna, or people who don't accept God, or people who are engaged fully in material life, even if they believe in God, but are engaged fully in material life with no understanding and no effort in their spiritual life. They're called less intelligent. And then, of course, we know that Manu Samhita says women are less intelligent. And so Prabhupada never dealt that way with his women. So that and sometimes he said, when you become a devotee, you become most intelligent. So that appears to be a contradiction. So you have a generalization, and then you have specific instances. So the generalization of women less intelligent doesn't mean necessarily, from a scholarly perspective, women are generally now doing better in school than men. And I think more women are graduating. Is that true? More women are graduating. So if you want a statistical proof that women are less intelligent, at least from an academic point of view, in modern society, at least in America, it appears the other way around, that men are not doing as well. You might find more men, is this true? More men in the sciences than women?
Yes.
You'll find more men, maybe philosophy, by nature, that are a little different. So if you want to say intelligence means more scientifically minded, then that may be true. But then Prabhupada said the general meaning of women less intelligent is they're more materially attached. So that you can see that women are more concerned about how they look, how they dress. That's in general. Doesn't mean men aren't. Doesn't mean that some women are not so concerned. These are generalizations. So when we make a generalization, it doesn't include specifics. There are women who have scientific minds. There are women who are not materially attached. There are men who don't have scientific minds. You're looking at one of them right now. And there are, when I was young, I don't know why, but I was very concerned about how I dressed and so forth. So I was a little bit like a woman when I was younger, and but still, in terms of interest in physics and chemistry, I don't have much interest or capacity And I have more interest in psychology. And 70% of psychology students or therapists are women. So maybe I'm half woman, I don't know. You agree?
No. There's a theory that talks about different kind of intelligence.
Yeah. So when Prabhupada, Madhapriya is saying there are different kinds of intelligence. In the late 90s, there was a book, or was the introduction of what has now come to be known, commonly accepted as emotional intelligence. But there's also kinesthetic intelligence, which is those who are more athletic or more coordinated. You can say there's musical intelligence. There's all kinds of spiritual intelligence, relational or communication intelligence. So these are, it's not exactly what Prabhupada is referring to, or the Shastra is referring to when they say less intelligent. They're meaning more materially attached, or you could say maybe more emotionally intelligent, because emotional intelligence means your ability to know what you're feeling. A lot of times you don't know. If you ask someone, what are you feeling, they'll say, I don't know. But it just means they're not able to feel. It's not that they're not feeling anything, it just means they're not able to feel. They're not aware of it. And they're not aware of what other people are feeling. And so generally you'll find women are more aware of what they're feeling, maybe sometimes too aware. And because of that, they tend to be more aware of what other people are thinking. That's called emotional intelligence. So generally when Shastra says women are less intelligent, it means that they're more materially attached, which in a sense is necessary to raise kids, because I know the way I raised my daughter was kind of like my wife would say, where is she? Oh, she's out somewhere. Where? Somewhere, I don't remember. Didn't she tell you where she was going? Yeah, but I didn't pay attention. So that's probably not, of course, Alachua was a pretty safe place, and we have 10 acres for her to wander around on. And usually when we can't find her, she's at our neighbor's house. So, but my wife is much more on top of these things. Where are you going? Who are you going with? Who's driving? When are you coming back? Call me, before you're leaving, And with me, it's like, I don't know where. So that's not good for parenting. And her so-called less intelligent, being more emotionally connected is good. But there, as we read earlier in this article, there are different kinds of intelligence. So emotional intelligence is a different kind of intelligence. So, and buddhi and medha we had discussed. So every man who's married knows that his wife has certain capabilities that he doesn't have. So that's where we've really run into trouble with this less intelligent, and it's been misunderstood. As I said before, if you study philosophically what less intelligence means, it generally means you're not Krishna conscious, or you're not surrendering to Krishna. That's what it means. You're less intelligent. So therefore anyone who's a devotee is more intelligent. But it's important that we understand generalizations and specifics. So, as I was saying, in general, women are more attached to home and children. But not all women are, and some men may be more attached to home and children, and decorating themselves and looking good, things traditionally considered female, than some men. So there are always specific differences. So whenever Prabhupada says something which is a generalization, then I think we always know that it's not true universally, but we don't know always how to process that, because we want to believe what Prabhupada said. And so we're trying to see what he said, but sometimes we don't see it and we get confused. But when you understand generalization and specifics, then it explains it. Yes, there are some women who are very scientifically intelligent, and some men who are not. But in general, you'll find more men. Yes?
I have, for example, a friend that is more concerned about his body than me. So you notice now that men actually are more like with this female nature than the women.
Yeah, well, we're all combinations of male and female. And so some women have a little more male than some men. It's possible. It could be a hormonal difference or personality difference. Like I said, when I was young, like 10 or 12, I was spent a lot of time picking my clothes and very concerned what I looked like. That changed later in life.
But this has a relationship with our previous incarnation?
It might. Seemed like it to me. I think I was a woman in my last life.
I think I was a man, for sure.
Yeah, you definitely, yeah. You maybe have the wrong body. But I think I may have been a woman. And then I finally became a man as a teenager. That's my theory. So, now earlier I was saying that sometimes you find contradictory statements by Srila Prabhupada. I think I've given this example before. So there's this statement, women are less intelligent. And then Prabhupada would say, you're all intelligent boys and girls. He didn't say, you're all intelligent boys and the girls, you just stay home and, make butter, churn butter. Although he did say that once in New Vrindavan, that the woman should stay home and churn butter. That's a traditional role. But even if Prabhupada was serious about that, which I think he was to some degree, because they were trying to live off the land, and so, if you don't want to be dependent on society, you're not going to go to the store to buy butter, so someone has to churn it. And it's good exercise. Also, you'll stay slim and trim if you churn butter. I've churned butter, so I can tell you it's not easy. So, but even if Prabhupada says something like that, then on the other hand, he's saying he's encouraging the women to be preachers. And he's saying, intelligent boys and girls, there's a conversation in which Prabhupada spoke to some woman. I forget the context. And after conversation, he said to this woman is very intelligent. So how we apply intelligence and how Prabhupada was applying it, I think that's where we've had a lot of problems. Because if I say less intelligent means more materially attached, then I think as men, at least married men, we can understand, well, if I by nature am a bit materially attached. So if my wife was like me, we wouldn't have any furniture in our house. We'd have 3 plates, one for me, one for her, and one for our daughter, and 3 spoons and 3 cups, and 3 dhotis and 3 saris, and maybe when the house would fall apart, we would say, whatever, Krishna's mercy. So women make a home nicer. And men who are married understand this point. At least a lot of them understand. If they weren't married, their house wouldn't look so nice. At least not as nice as it looks. So men can appreciate, if that's what less intelligent means, that they're more attached to home and more attached to children and so forth, and attached to their body, and that's good because men want their wives to look beautiful. If they're not attached to their body, then they won't look beautiful, and some men won't mind, but some men will. Why don't you make yourself beautiful? So it's in that sense, instead of looking at it in a negative way, you look at it in a positive way. Well, this is good. And if you say less intelligent means more attached, then you have to ask the question, did Krishna create them that way for a specific purpose? Or did Krishna create them that way so the men could walk around saying, we're smarter than you, so just do whatever I say? No. But Krishna created men in a certain way and women in a certain way, and if men act in a particular way, women act in a particular way, it works. But the problem is, if I think someone's less intelligent, my conditioned side wants to take advantage, wants to put them down, wants to exhibit my superiority. When in fact, any man who's married knows that a lot of times their wives make better decisions. And their wives advise them, don't do this, this isn't right. And then when they don't do it and if they get a good result, they say, yeah, she was right. So they don't actually have that experience that they're less intelligent on that level, or always. But sometimes they have experience of material attachment or being more emotional, more controlled by emotion. So we have to put it in perspective. But my point was, the 2 points we're making is there's a generalization, not all women are like that, and we misunderstand it, and it's not the only thing that Prabhupada said about women, so that a lot of men or a lot of people may globalize it. Oh, in every aspect of life, the man is superior. Not necessarily, but the man wants to be superior, that's for sure. He wants to be in a superior position. But now you have a contradiction. And the contradiction is the man wants to be superior, the woman by nature will take inferior, I don't know if inferior, subordinate role and serve the husband. And it works. But there are instances when Prabhupada said, if the woman is more Krishna conscious, she can take the superior role. So those are, it's not a generalization, but it was a specific instance in which it was found that the woman was more advanced than her husband. And so Prabhupada said she could lead, which is not Vedic and kind of alarming and not what you would expect from a spiritual master to say. But Prabhupada is dealing both philosophically and practically. So here's a general philosophical point. Men should be in a superior position, women should serve the husband. Because psychologically it works, because the man wants to be in charge and the woman by nature has an easier time serving the man. But it doesn't always work well in every situation because she may be more Krishna conscious and it may be better at that. He follows her. And there are men who realize their wife is more Krishna conscious and they're humble enough to put themselves in that position, because in some cases a woman who's a devotee may marry a man who's like a life member and not a devotee, and he understands that she's more Krishna conscious. So at least in relation to spiritual matters, he just defers to her. He respects her judgment and her opinions. So is there something wrong with that? No. The ultimate criteria is not necessarily who should be in charge or who's more intelligent, etc., but what is the best for being Krishna conscious. So that's why Prabhupada made that statement. In this particular situation, he could follow her because that would be the best for him. Perhaps the best for her also, but at least the best for him. Yes?
There's many things there, because first of all, how you can determine that in a couple somebody is more advanced than other? You have certain parameters to this thing? Because it's complicated.
Sometimes it's more obvious.
Yes, but when you have...
Your husband's at Mangalartik, you're sleeping, you're trying to finish your rounds at 11 at night, he's got them done by 6:30. You read, one verse every week, he reads 2 hours a day. He's not interested in things you're interested in. So sometimes it's just obvious.
And another thing that you mentioned, it's about that the woman usually takes better decisions.
In certain areas, not everywhere.
For example, I don't know, it's a general idea or it's only like a Latin American idea that a woman has like a sixth
sense. Yeah, women's intuition, yeah. So the point is understanding. There are two things: understanding what Prabhupada means by less intelligent, and then not making broad generalizations that apply in cases that you're trying to apply in cases that they shouldn't be applied in. And so, as I said, if someone becomes a devotee, they're considered the most intelligent. And then Prabhupada said, any woman who becomes a devotee, she's the most intelligent. And I think that's obvious. And it's strange that some men didn't get that. They wanted to employ this, well, women are less intelligent. But all the people who are not devotees, by definition, they're less intelligent. And all the people who are devotees, by definition, they're more intelligent. It doesn't mean that a woman who becomes a devotee is not, in general, more materially attached than men. So on that, if you're defining intelligence in that way, you can say yes, in general. But again, the point is, generalizations don't deal with everybody in every situation. And obviously there's some women who've become devotees who are very renounced. It was by nature they were renounced. They never married. They were fully engaged in service. They, at an early age, put on white, and much more renounced than most men. They moved to Vrindavan and 64 rounds and like that. So you might say those are exceptions, and it's true, but you can't overlook the exception and generalize everyone. You have to deal with people individually. It's like someone might say to me, what do you think of Colombians? And my natural answer, and I think this should be our answer when anybody asks you, what do you think of Indians? What do you think of black people? What do you think of anyone? You say, well, which one are you talking about? It has to be. That has to be the only answer. Because otherwise you make a generalization, and generalization doesn't mean that everybody's like that. It may mean they're like the ones you met are like that. It doesn't mean everyone's like that.
But the thing is, for example, Shastra have to generalize, because you cannot give like a particular Shastra for every people, every person.
Yeah. But also our Shastra generalizes, but it puts people into categories: Shudra, Vaishya, Kshatriya, Brahman.
Generalization, because you cannot say that everybody's a Shudra or everybody's a Brahman.
No, but there's a generalization of quality. But the problem in Kali Yuga, which makes this a little more complicated, is you find very few people who are purely Brahmins or purely Kshatriyas or purely Vaishyas, maybe purely Shudra. But even you'll find a person, he's Shudra, but he's also Brahminical, and he's also got a little Vaishya in him. So we understand that it wasn't so much like that when in early days of Kali Yuga or previously, your Varna is very clear. So it's symptomatic of Kali Yuga that things are not. It's more difficult to generalize than it was previously. So we have to take that in consideration. Whenever there's a generalization, the problem I think that a lot of devotees have is they understand the generalization, but they see so many exceptions to it, and then they're trying to understand, well, does Prabhupada mean everyone's like this? There's no exception? And you find in Kali Yuga things are so mixed. The other day I was in, I forget where I was. I was in Walmart buying a backup drive, hard drive. And I was walking down the aisle and there was a woman. And she looked like a man, she walked like a man, she had a short haircut. And I was thinking, and I wouldn't want to fight with her because I would lose. Even if I was 35 years old, I would lose. She was like weighed a lot more than me. And she was and I was looking at her and I was thinking, she's much more male than I am. I'm not like an alpha male by nature. So there's one of many exceptions. Here's a woman, women are like this and that. Well, not this one. She just looked tough. She looked like if I walked in front of her, she'd like push me over, And most women are not like that. So when there's a generalization, we can't be blind to the reality of the exceptions. And I think it's a great disservice to any woman who joins ISKCON to tell them you're less intelligent, or to have to explain that in a class, but not explain what it means. Doesn't mean you're stupid. It means it. And whenever people ask me that, I say, well, women, they're more emotional. They're generally, they care more about how they look, and all the women will say, yeah, because all the women know that. A lot of men, just you look at them and like you think, excuse me, are you colorblind? This shirt doesn't match these pants, and like and when was the last time you actually cleaned that shirt? And they look at it and go, oh yeah, there's mustard on it. I didn't notice. That wouldn't pass by any woman. And they say that women, when they get married, they tolerate the way their husband dresses for 6 months, and after 6 months they can't tolerate it, and they start telling him what to wear and what not to wear. So you can't deny that as a reality. And so the women being less intelligent, that's part of it. They're more concerned about what they look like. They're less intelligent. In this context means more bodily conscious. So generally you see that. I mean, even in our temple, just look around the temple room, look at the women's side and the men's side. Who's more well dressed? There's a few men that are really dressed well, but most of them, they don't. You can see how much time did it take the men to get ready? Probably 3 minutes. How much time take the women to get ready? Probably 15 to a half an hour. Why?
3 hours.
Yeah, or whatever. Yeah, they're putting on makeup, and I'm thinking that's 2 rounds, or that's 2 shlokas I could have memorized. Like, why do you need them? You're just going to the temple, not going to a wedding or anything. So men think differently, and it's more important for women to look good. And obviously there are men that are like that, and there are women that aren't like that. And so we have to understand these generalizations, otherwise we'll mislead people and make people start to believe they're something that they're not. And that's been documented, or at least there's testimonials to that some women, they felt disempowered by being told this without explaining it. And then if you see a woman like Vishaka Devi Dasi, who wrote this article, and she's been speaking about this in different places, and if you listen to her, the only thing you can think is, wow, she's so intelligent. That's, and for someone to not recognize that is to deny reality based on a universal application of women are less intelligent, or a misunderstanding of it. And you can't spread a movement where you're telling people things and they're sitting in the audience and they're saying, no, you're not describing reality. You have to be able to describe it so it matches reality. And a lot of times we'll try to describe something, but that's in Shastra, but we don't understand it. So we're not describing it in a way that's understandable to people, because people will say, no, it's not like that. How can you say that? And then they lose trust in us because we're saying things that to them are wrong, or may even appear stupid or even ridiculous. Right? So we have to be careful. So the point I was making earlier is that what makes this discussion interesting is that sometimes Prabhupada says one thing, but then he says the opposite. So woman should be subservient, and then there's a letter to a woman, or to the husband, that your wife is more advanced, so you should serve her. They just flipped it around. Why did he flip it? Because in that situation, the generalization didn't apply. Women should, New Vrindavan, women should stay home and take care of the kids and churn butter and grow food and so forth. And then I want all my sons and daughters to get Bhakti Shastri degree. Well, you can't stay home and do butter and have time for that and become preachers, become gurus, distribute books, and all these other things he's saying. So the expertise, when Prabhupada said those things, it wasn't a contradiction for him, because it was just time and place. So it's time and place. Here's New Vrindavan. You want to be self-sufficient? Okay. You want to establish Varnashram? Okay, this is what the women will do. But then New Vrindavan became simultaneously a community that was inviting the world to come, that was building a replica of Vrindavan, that needed lots of money, and so they were going out raising money and the women were going out. And Prabhupada never said, no, get them back to churn butter. Stop this. It was so. When you see contradictions, sometimes the contradictions are time, place, and there are lots of contradictions about men and women. So then I read something that Prabhupada says within a particular context, and then I generalize it or globalize it, universalize it. Yeah, that's a better word. I universalize it. Is that a word? Universalize. Can you look it up? If it's not a word, call up Webster's and tell them to put it in the dictionary. Universalize it. But you could err on both sides of the statements to universalize either one. Oh, well, I read here Prabhupada said that this woman should lead her husband, so I come home and tell my husband, look at, I think we got it wrong, because Prabhupada said here. And he's like, well, what about the other statements? No, so you're prejudiced to this statement, and he's prejudiced to that statement. So you want to understand it contextually. So when you understand it contextually, then you understand this applies in that context, this applies in this context, and they could be entirely different situations. So where we get hung up is if we say this is the only understanding, or this is the absolute understanding, when in fact it was contextual. It may be the general understanding. Yeah, generally women will take a subordinate position to the men. There are some exceptions. And you don't want to generalize either, or at least you want to understand them. So now Prabhupada engaged women in preaching. Could they give class? Yes. Could they run temples? Yes. Now some people say, well, that was because the women wanted to do that, they were pushing for that, or we weren't advanced enough at that point that the women could understand that they should not take those positions. I don't think those arguments are fair. I think the fair argument would be that if we're going to establish varnashram, then we may want traditional roles for women. And that's okay if you're going to establish varnashram in your locale, and the people that come are not forced into that situation, but they're coming because they want that. That's different. I was just, I want to share this, it's quite interesting. I was just conversing with a god brother, and he, I think before he was a devotee, he must have been in the Peace Corps or something, and he was helping village people become self-sufficient. And he studied it. And he said, if you want to change a culture, let's say I'm here telling all of you, you should leave the city, you should go to the land and become self-sufficient, live on the land. All right, so first thing, when you go, you get your land and there's no house. Okay, how do you build your house? Well, you're going to have to build it from what's there in the earth. Well, I don't know how to build. And that's going to be tough. And anyway, let's say you manage to do that in the first winter, you have very little to eat, and you're chopping wood and you're exhausted because you've never done it, and then you have to do everything by hand and build the fires by hand and wash your clothes by, So his point was, how many people could make that transition from being raised in a city? And he said, statistically, it's about 0 or 1%, because you, like we say, you can take the India out of India. What's the saying? You can take the actual saying is, you can take a man out of the city to the country, but you can't take the city out of the man. So it's cultural. So he was saying it takes about 3 generations. Like if you want to create varnashram where we all live off the land, it would take about 3 generations to reculturalize. So it's extremely rare to reculturalize people. And so, let's go out to the land and expect everyone to want to live on the land. We see that in ISKCON, the communities that are most successful are people that are living in the country but not self-sufficient. They still have jobs and like that, and they still have certain standards. And very few devotees are even have the knowledge to live off the land, what to speak of the desire to do that kind of austerity. So it would take gradual development. Yes?
But for example, in my particular case, and I have many friends that they are raised in a city, but I prefer 100% sure that I want to be in a county,
Being in the country is one thing, but creating varnashram where we're totally independent of modern culture and all its conveniences, that's a different thing. And you actually have to live that way to know how. I mean, that's how people used to live 150 years ago. So we have none of the conveniences. Your lights, you have to light your lights. You have no central heating, you have no air conditioning now. So, you're growing all your food.
But the thing is, for example, I'm from Colombia.
No, wait.
Things are not very typical, and all the things are offered.
If they've come from that background, if it's in their genealogy, But anyway, this is the research that there have been. He was saying there have been 5,000 experiments in communal self-sufficiency, and 5,000 of them have failed. It was all city people. He said 5,000 experiments with city people going to the country to live self-sufficient.
The origin of the people, if they are American.
Yeah, I don't know if they were American. People who have no connection with any ancestral line of people living off the land were unable to do it. Yeah, I mean, you can research it in your country, see if it's different. But the point he was making is that culture, you can't change people's culture immediately, and Prabhupada said that. So some devotees will say, we want to go back to this traditional culture, and no one would argue with it other than saying you can't do it. People won't be able to do it, and so there's obviously you can do better. We see that, when men become devotees and women become devotees, they become a little more human. They become deculturalized a little bit. It's a slow and gradual process, but it's not a drastic process. It's not like when a woman becomes a devotee, she turns into a Indian village woman overnight. And sometimes we've seen women trying to do that, and in many cases they end up leaving. They've taken an extreme position. They're trying to be this, they hear about these submissive wives and extremely chaste women, and not that wives shouldn't be submissive and chaste, but sometimes they try to imitate it to a level that's impossible, and they just leave. They feel like I'm a failure. So these are Prabhupada's own words. You can't change culture overnight. And so Prabhupada adapted to it. And so we have to be sensitive to that. It's a reality. So if we're looking, say, we want to create this tradition, and I know a lot of devotees are talking about tradition, because when you look at the tradition is better. For example, it's better if a girl gets married when she's 11, because then she doesn't have to, there's no chance of her getting pregnant, she doesn't have to go through puberty and this whole thing about boyfriends and girlfriends and then get depressed and have her boyfriend cheat on her. But practically speaking, that doesn't work. It works on paper. Yeah, this would be good, but in this culture, how would that work? It has to be a culture in which it's been going on for a few generations. So when you're a little girl and you're 3 years old, from the age of 3 or 4, well, I'll get married, and this is what married looks like. I'll get married when I'm 11, I'll move in to the house when I'm 13, I'll have a kid when I'm 14. And you say, have a kid when you're 14? That is like insanity. But all your friends had kids when they're 14, so it's normal. And your mother's there, your grandmother's there. And your mother's still young, so she can run around the house and take care of the kid. And, by the time she's 35, all her kids are grown up. So she can be a pretty feisty grandmother. And your great-grandmother's there, and you got this big family. Okay, then it starts to make sense. But everyone needs the mentality for it to work, and we don't have that mentality. So I have to continue my train of thought. Maybe things will change over time in ISKCON, but it's important to understand about the cultural changes. Like a lot of devotees are calling for these huge shifts in culture, in women's roles, men's roles, and so forth. And as much as we can do, I would never say don't do it, as long as it works and everyone is comfortable with it. You know, but I've seen in some cases people try to do it and it backfires because it goes against their nature. They're trying to be a certain way and they can't. So that wasn't, you know, obviously we have principles, we have culture. But if you see practically, if you come to America and look at American ISKCON, the devotees are very American. It's just their culture. It's the way they are and the way they live. And we're trying to be Vedic and so forth, but it's just in my observance, it's just the way you're raised is the way you're raised. If you go right now, go to Alachua, well, not right now, it's too early, but go at 10 o'clock and knock on doors and see what devotees are wearing. How many are wearing saris or Punjabis or whatever you call them, and how many are wearing, you know. And someone may say, well, that's bad, that's a problem with ISKCON. And I would say, they'll say, they'll wear at home what they're comfortable with, and what, you know. And, you're working, you're doing stuff, and, you may feel like a dhoti or sari is getting in the way. So they'll say, yeah, but in India, every woman wears a sari. Yeah, okay, but I wasn't raised wearing sari, so it's not comfortable for me, and so on. Or it's too hot, and, whatever. So I'm not making a judgment on this, I'm just saying it's a reality and you can't be blind to the reality and you have to deal with it. This is how it is. And then you make it as Krishna conscious as possible. Is that you can't be Krishna conscious because you took your dhoti off after the morning program, and you're more Krishna conscious because you didn't take it off. I don't know. Maybe. Or you might think that way. And then that could be a problem because you think I'm more Krishna conscious than the one in pants. Or as they say in England, pants means underpants. Trousers. Trousers. It's not a common word in America. Trousers. So this is where you get a lot of disagreement between the traditional and the modern. And I don't think the devotees who are proponents of more modern culture are actually like modern culture or think it's superior. I think in some ways they see that traditional culture is superior. In some ways they see it's outmoded. But they're being practical and not equating necessarily culture with signs of spiritual advancement. If you're submissive to your husband, does that mean you're more Krishna conscious? Maybe, maybe not. If you're not submissive to your husband, does it mean you're not Krishna conscious? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you're not submissive because he doesn't deserve it. Maybe you are submissive because that's how you were trained since you were 6 years old and it's very easy for you and you like that. Does that help your Krishna consciousness? Maybe, maybe not. So we are supposed to learn what helps our Krishna consciousness. And if we do something Vedic which gets in the way of our Krishna consciousness, then we have to ask the question, what's the point of it? The whole point of it is to enhance our Krishna consciousness, to bring us to a more sattvic lifestyle. And if it's not, then it may not be helpful. Or if it's not helpful, what's the point? So I wouldn't want to be one to say, Prabhupada, I established this, I came to Alachua, I became the president, we turned it to a Vedic community. And he says, well, how's it going? Well, nobody comes to the temple anymore. But we're Vedic. But what do you think Prabhupada would say? Probably kick me out. Say, get out of here, you've ruined everything. Right? No, Prabhupada, but it's Vedic. So that's nice. Vedic is supposed to be a foundation upon which we build our devotional practices. But if devotees can't do it and you enforce it to the point where they don't come, what's the point then? So there's this controversy, if you call it controversy, or this different sides of and the different sides will always be there because people have different natures. So some people by nature will be more traditional and more attracted to traditional cultural values, be they Indian or otherwise. And some people are just who they are and they don't relate to it. And they probably never will, no matter how Krishna conscious they are. They'll still like their avocado tomato sandwich with vegan cheese. Or they might even be vegans. Oh my God, like what an offense to the cows. And so someone will say, you're vegan, you're offending the cow. And someone say, no, I'm protecting the cow. So this it's like, I was reading a book the other day, and a devotee was looking at situations within ISKCON and coming to certain conclusions, certain history, and coming to certain conclusions. And some of the conclusions, I think, were obvious, everyone would agree with, and some of the conclusions were very much his opinion that everyone wouldn't agree with. And so, and some of the conclusions people would be very, very much in disagreement of. So that's the nature. That's just going to be the nature. But we have to be able to understand things within context, understand specifics versus generalizations, and understand things which Prabhupada said, which sometimes are the opposite. So we don't get caught up in, no, Prabhupada said this. Yeah, but he said that also. Okay, so why did he say that, and what was the context? What did he mean? So, we have a question.
I have a commentary and a question. Because now...
Your documentary, it's called a comment, not a documentary. A documentary is a Spanish word. It's in English, it's documentary.
Documentary.
That's a film. A documentary is a film.
Yeah.
You have a comment.
A comment.
And not a commentary. It would be like it was like a comment on a comment is a commentary. You have a comment. I want a comment and a question.
A comment. So, for example, now it's more hard to have like these pure cultural things.
It's more difficult, not more hard.
Okay, more difficult. Because now we have all these kind of connections through internet.
Right.
So we have influence not only for the people that live with us, it's the influence of the people that are connected with us.
Yeah, look at India today. It's like any modern city in the world. At least by dress, at least the younger people by dress, they're no different. How did the young girls and boys in the colleges in India figure out that t-shirts and jeans are what college students wear? That's what I wore. I started college in 1968. What I wear to college? T-shirt and jeans. It's like kind of like a universal dress. How do they know that? Yeah, social media. So, when did college kids start wearing t-shirts and jeans? When social media became, or television and MTV. And so what you say is an obvious reality. And so a lot of people say now we have one culture around the world. It's true. A lot of times I'm in different countries and I forget where I am because it looks exactly the same as everywhere else. Franchise stores, the highways all have the same signs. It's like the highway was built by the same company. The cars are identical because Japanese cars and Fords and BMWs and Mercedes, they're everywhere. And in China you get a few more American cars, but it's like you don't know where you are unless you actually look at the people, hear the people speaking. You go, oh yeah, I'm in Colombia. I forgot. So, yeah, it's definitely a reality.
No, the question.
But it's not a great culture, and that's why proponents of a more Vedic culture say, well, this culture it's tamasic and it's degrading, and no one will argue with that. My point is that What Prabhupada did, and we have to be sensitive to, is that he did what he could with the people that he had. And someone may say, but we're more evolved now. Say, okay, go start your Vedic community and show us how evolved we are. Take the people out of the city, put them on the land, have them milk cows and grow their own food, and let's see what happens. Right? Show us how to do it. I don't think any devotee's against it, but the question of practicality is there, And if you apply the same ideal, okay, here's the ideal of male-female. The wife should be this way, the husband. Okay, we could see that works, just like it works for the girl to get married when maybe she's 8 years old. Here's your husband. So, but can that work in the present context? We have to see. And we can't just enforce it because that's the standard. We have to see practically how much of that will and will not work. And that's the point. Yes?
But the thing is, now the roots are more weak. And now, even with a small thing, the people change very quickly. You see, for example...
Culturally?
Like, yes. Because, for example, now the teenagers, for example, my students, I show them something different. And then the next week, they're going to be like that same. Even if they're completely like strange for them. Yeah. So now they have like no attachment for their own culture. They are very like detached about these things. So I think, this is the question: is not more easy now to be Krishna conscious?
Is it what?
More easy to be Krishna conscious.
Is it normal?
No, more easy.
To be Krishna conscious then?
The previous years, because the previous years we don't have like this kind of like general knowledge about everything. And now
is it easier to be Krishna conscious because of the access to knowledge on the internet?
Yes.
I think that the best answer to the question is there's no material cause for being Krishna conscious. So I would just say it's a facility that you can use. And if you use it, then it will be helpful. But you won't not necessarily use it. And also, you have to be in a certain state to be able to take advantage of it. So even though maybe you have access to knowledge and lectures and PDFs that we never had before in so many books, there's no guarantee, that you're going to be Krishna. It's just a facility that you can utilize, which can be extremely helpful. But you also have to add into the equation the effects of culture now, which is more materialistic. So you have, one sense, more facility, but then to get that facility, you have to go on the internet and wade through all the other stuff that distracts you to get to that. So I don't think it's an easy answer. Okay, I'm going to go on and look for this lecture. So I go on YouTube, I type it in. And when the lecture comes up, there's like 20 other things I could watch. And I go, oh, that looks... And all of a sudden I click on that, and I don't look at the lecture. Or the lecture's boring, so I click on this is about Trump, and, someone's going to try to throw him off a bridge, and his wife slapped him in the face. So that sounds interesting. Let me read that. So, you have, it's not ideal. There's no ideal situation. You have to be the right person to take advantage of it. Even you go to Vrindavan or Mayapur and say, is that ideal? Yeah, if you take advantage of it. But, there's devotees who've been there who left Mayapur to leave Krishna consciousness, who lived in Mayapur. So, that's weird. And that devotee probably would still be a devotee if they didn't go to Mayapur. Mayapur was too much. They were trying to do too much. Like, you remember I was saying earlier that sometimes if you're trying to be Vedic, it may be too difficult, it's too unnatural, or you're too Vedic. And this devotee was trying to be too Vedic, and it was too unnatural. And so he just crashed against a wall and said, I can't do this, this is too difficult, and just gave up. So that's the danger of being too Vedic. Obviously, the danger of not being Vedic at all is tamaguna. You'll just, you won't be Brahminical. So I prefer, rather than Vedic, Western, I think the paradigm we want is Brahminical. Because you can be Brahminical has a certain standard. It's sattvic. Well, our culture is sattvic. Sattvic food, right? It doesn't have to be Indian food or sattvic clothes. It's cotton or natural fibers. Sattvic living is clean. The morning is sattvic. That's not a cultural thing. Within any culture you can be sattvic, and I think that's what we really should be stressing. Sattvic culture, Brahminical culture, the culture of knowledge, the culture of devotion, simplicity, compassion, all the qualities of the Brahmins, samadhammas, taposocham, like that. You find in Bhagavad Gita, sattvic qualities, forgiveness, honesty, so forth. That's really, so when you get caught in, Western, Eastern, that you might say, well, the Eastern or the Vedic is more conducive to sattva. Yeah, for some people, but for some people, no, they can't do it. So you force somebody to do something they can't do, that's not going to be helpful.
If you said Vedic and Brahmanical is different, and I couldn't understand what is Vedic. I feel that Vedic is if you are more Vedic, it's like you are going to more spiritual.
Well, Vedic, in this context, Vedic would mean Varnashram. Okay. What Vedic means from the Vedas. But you can follow, like Duryodhana, by certain standards, was Vedic. He did as a Kshatriya, he was Vedic, a Vedic atheist, a Vedic asura. Following the injunctions of the Vedas is Vedic. But what aspect of the Vedas are we interested in the Brahminical, coming to a Brahminical culture, and ultimately Bhakti? We have the Bhakti Shastras, which are the essence of the Vedas. So you can, sattvic as a category can be applied within any culture. What are the sattvic foods? What's the sattvic lifestyle? It's just my intuition that if Krishna consciousness is going to be spread all over the world, at least what I see is you can't interfere too much with the culture, and it has to be something that people naturally adapt. When I was in Israel, they had some Christian Arabs coming, and the women all cover their heads. That's just what they do. So, we're not going to say, well, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. No, that's their culture. They understand it, so they do it. Or if a Muslim woman becomes a devotee, it would be natural for her. At least if she's used to covering her head, she probably still would. It's just, so we're more interested in the Brahminical aspects. Rising early, taking bath, chanting, puja, study, and then Brahminical qualities, sama, dhamma, stapa, sense control, equanimity, and so forth. So, you can do that within any culture, within any country, But the Vedic would lead to that through Varnashram. It would lead to that. But we're kind of just like, okay, let's just do it. And the point I'm making is it has to be something natural that people want to do. You find that some devotees join and they very much like the Indian culture and the Vedic, and they adapt to it. It's just the way they like wearing these clothes, they like getting up early, they like Indian food, everything. It's just so, why would you tell them not to? And if they don't, why would you try to, you have to eat chapatis. You go to Italy and tell them no more pizza, just chapatis. It's not going to work. Even we've been in ISKCON for 45 years in Italy. If you go there, you're going to get pizza more than you'll get chapatis, or at least equal. You're not going to take the pizza out of the Italians. You won't. They have an Italian doing pizza in Mayapur. You can't take the pizza out of Italians. And you can't take those corn things out of Radhapriya. You can't take arepas out of Colombians. Yeah. I think Premananda Gore is watching. He can confirm that. So, it's okay. Sometimes, like you'll listen to a devotee, especially American, and they'll give a class, and they've been devotees, like they're Prabhupada disciples, have been a devotee a long time, and they'll be using all these American expressions. And you might think, why after so many years are they're still so American? They're using American expressions and American jokes, and they still have an American accent. Shouldn't they be speaking like this by now? We're going to Hare Krishna. I'm Hare Krishna. I should speak like this. You would think, well, they if I were speaking like an Indian because I think that's what I'm supposed to do, you'd think there's something wrong with that, right? So it's natural because it's our culture, that, or I'm Jewish, so even when I get around other Jewish devotees, there's a little bit of like, the Jewish stuff comes out. Like, did your mother ever say this to you? Did your mother ever make this? And I just saw Brahmatirtha and he told me a Jewish joke, which was like such a good joke. So true and funny. And so it's just natural. Those things are in you, but they're not necessarily obstacles. Everything's meant to be utilized. And if there's something within our culture which is tamasic and rajasic, then, the hamburgers and, that's our culture. No, we're not going to do that. That's sinful. So obviously, Vedic culture is less sinful and, so forth and so on. But Prabhupada just organized it in a way that we could make bhakti out of everything. And so bhakti is the main ingredient. So you make bhakti out of your family, out of your marriage, and however you do it. And so if we understand that, then when we disagree, we don't really disagree. It's just this becomes preference. But now what's happening in a lot of the disagreements, they're making them philosophical points. But you can't, because Shastra says so many things about this, and Prabhupada said so many things about this. So really you're arguing preference in the name of philosophy. And even if you make an observation that this is wrong for these reasons, really if you really get down to the basics, it's really just the way you prefer to see it, because it furthers your agenda. And so if you have an agenda, your preferences are to see it a certain way, and because it's your agenda, you'll just say, no, this is the tattva. It's not the tattva, it's your opinion, it's your preference. That works for you. And then you quote Prabhupada, see, it's the tattva. And then someone else quotes Prabhupada and says, no, it's just preference, not tattva. If Prabhupada only says one thing, like sometimes Prabhupada said, you're not the body. Another time he didn't say, well, actually you are the body. No, he just said, you're not the body. That's tattva. And that's why we don't argue about it. No one ever had an argument. Are we not the body? Or are we the body? There was never an argument because it's a tattva. But when you get opinionated in the name of tattva, then you get all these problems. And because we're subjective, we tend to see things as true, even though it's through a clouded lens of opinion or preference. And that's where all the misunderstanding comes. So if you just understand what's tattva and what is not tattva, what is opinion and preference and what is tattva. So, my preference is varnashram, living off the land, traditional. Your preference is preaching in a modern context, resonating with people in a modern context. Okay. Is one right or wrong? No, Prabhupada has given both. And by giving both, then devotees who are attracted to more traditional, or devotees who feel more comfortable living within their own culture, will find their place. And the goal is to become Krishna conscious. So, you can become Krishna conscious in any environment because it's the practice of sadhana that you strictly follow and service that's going to make you Krishna conscious, whether it's within one cultural context or another. That's the Brahminical culture. So you maintain the Brahminical culture, then you're good. In any country, in any context. So, the Brahminical culture is the great unifier of ISKCON. Whether you're modern or traditional, you maintain Brahminical culture and then everything is good. Right? Does that make sense? So I think it's important to understand, is something your preference or is something a tattva? And a lot of times we're having these arguments, and they're very interesting arguments because Prabhupada has said different things at different times about the same topic. So someone is quoting all the one side argument, and someone is quoting all the other side argument, and they're trying to make their point. When in fact, it's just a preference that the person has to a more traditional or a more, I don't know what the word is, I don't want to use the word liberal, more open or adaptive. And so my preference is to preach in this way, my preference is to establish my family in this way or my temple in this way, my preference is to do it in a more traditional way. Within that context, there's certain things both sides have to do. They can't compromise those. But their preferences, because they feel it's more effective for them and more effective for people they're preaching to. So if we see it that way, it's easier to understand the arguments. It's just like now we had this issue with, but not just now, for the last 15 years, the issue of female or Vaishnavi Diksha Gurus has been discussed. And a lot of devotees said, this is what Prabhupada wants, we have statements. A lot of devotees said, no, it's a contradiction of Varnashram and our traditional culture. So, and they were saying, in India it's not going to be accepted, and the Western devotees are saying, if we don't allow this in the Western countries, then there's so many people won't become devotees because they can't understand this kind of discrimination. So the GBC was trying to amalgamate that and say, okay, let the temples decide if they want it or not. Let the temples decide what is beneficial in that situation. So there was some preference there, rather than saying this is absolutely the way Prabhupada wanted it. And it's unfair to say certain things are absolutely the way Prabhupada wanted it when you can see he said different things at different times about it. And you would have to ignore certain things he said to just make one point. Now, if it's tattva, which is universal truth, then Prabhupada always said, you're not the body, you're a servant of Krishna, Krishna's God. Obviously, these are not things we argue about, and you'll never see devotees arguing about it because Shastra is very unequivocal about it. But when Prabhupada's saying different things, isn't it obvious that those who tend to be attracted to one side or another, it's the way that works for them and the way they see the world and the way they would prefer execute Krishna consciousness? I think that's obvious. But if we try to make it a philosophical tattva when it wasn't presented that way by Prabhupada, then we run into trouble. And that's why sometimes you have trouble if you don't understand the topic completely, because they say, oh, Prabhupada said this and that, and you don't know he said this and that on another occasion, or you don't know the analysis, you haven't read all the purports on that particular topic, and you don't understand it in a 360-degree way, then you may misrepresent it. And so we've seen that when we were young devotees. Some things were misrepresented due to lack of understanding. Right? That makes sense? So, if you have any questions, I'm going to stop here. I don't think I missed anybody's questions. I'm just going back to see. Radhe. Yeah, okay. I don't know if this was clear or not. So, we will see you tomorrow. Same time, same station. We'll continue this discussion, and we'll read, tomorrow we're going to read about what it means to protect. I said women should be protected, but also children, elders, Brahmins, what it means to protect them. Is it just physical protection? Is there other kind of protection? Is there different protection given to the different classes of people? The reason we're reading that is because our Shastra says women should be protected, but it doesn't only say women should be protected. It says the other classes, cows as well. So what does it mean to protect? It means, protect from hurt. What kind of hurt? And how they're protected, and they're protected for different reasons. They're protected because they need to survive. And so cows need to survive, Brahmins need to survive, elders obviously need to be protected at a certain stage of life, and children, elders and children sometimes in similar positions where they can't take care of themselves. And women protected from exploitation. Well, there's such a strong tendency in today's culture to exploit women. So that's very important. And spiritual protection is given by the spiritual master, by Srila Prabhupada, for everyone. Okay, so we'll see you tomorrow. It's 8 o'clock on the East Coast. Tomorrow, I think, is daylight savings. So, if tomorrow is daylight savings, then fall back. We're going to turn the clock back. Does anybody know? We're going to turn the clock back. So 8 o'clock would be 9 o'clock. So if that's the case, I'm going to start class later, because we're going to lose an hour. We'll figure it out and we'll let you know. Hare Krishna, everyone. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.